Is the new Renters' Right Bill going to kill rent to rent? Some people think so, but let's find out. Hello, my name's Mark Fitzgerald. It's great to have you joining me here today. So if you've lived under a rock, you haven't heard about the Renters' Right Bill. This is where the government are changing the ASTs, the contracts that we use with tenants, and also changing some of the rules and regulations around tenancies in the UK market, in the British market, in England, basically. So an AST normally was either a 6-month or 12-month contract that you would have with a tenant. It's normally 6 months when you're in HMOs and normally 12 months if you're doing buy-to-lets. Now what the government want to do is change that to a month-on-month rolling contract rather than actually tenants having the safety of locking themselves in for a nice agreement. Now there are some different rules for us as, so to speak, landlords than there has been in the past. And of course, you know, a tenancy can be ended within 1 month's notice for the actual tenant. But for us landlords, we have to give, 2 to 3 months notice to actually ask the tenants to leave. So it's a bit of a nonsense, if I'm quite honest with you. It's not really something I'm worried about. But what is annoying me at the moment is when people are out there basically saying rent to rent now is dead. You cannot do rent to rent anymore as soon as this legislation comes in. That is actually incorrect. That is normally talked about and spoken about by people who've never done rent to rent and don't actually know how to set up and run a compliant rent to rent business. Now, what do I mean by that? These are people that think that we use an AST contract to do a deal with the landlord or letting agent on a rent to rent property. That is absolutely crazy. If you are doing AST or using AST contracts to do your rent-to-rent deals, then you're doing it wrong anyway. But these people are wrong. Yes, rent-to-rent will be dead because you cannot lock in a big agreement. You cannot do 3 to 5 years anymore. And this is what they're naively talking about. So if you've heard this, any networking events or anything, then it is a load of rubbish. What we want to be using contractually when we do rent to rent is management agreements, which is very much the same as a letting agent uses with their landlords, or a commercial lease agreement if the property is not mortgaged. These are 2 contracts that you can use when doing rent to rent deals and should be using as well. In my training, the Rent to Rent Business Builder, I give you these contracts. I give you copies of these contracts so you know exactly the types of contracts that you should be using. But you should not be using licensed agreements. You should not be using ASTs when it comes to these things. So when people are saying this to you or they're talking about it, these people do not know what they're on about. Okay, unfortunately, they think they do, but they don't. They haven't got the facts straight. As I say, if you are out there using ASTs on your rent-to-rent contracts with your landlords, then you're using the wrong contracts. You think of a letting agent. Now, a letting agency, whether you give them one of your HMOs or your buy-to-lets, they will use a management agreement. And most of the time, in any mortgage terms and contracts, it will say, we allow a management agreement to be used to run the property. And that is why that is what we use for rent to rent. We use a management agreement. Now, with our tenants that are staying in the properties, we would have used, or we can still use, ASTs, okay? Then it could be going to licensed agreements. It could be going to shorter term tenancies. But fundamentally right here, right now, it's AST, so I'll keep talking about that. And when it changes, I'll do an update and an updated video on all of that so you know about that as well. But that's what you use with your tenants, okay? You use ASTs with your tenants. You use management agreements or commercial agreements with either the letting agency, if you're going through a letting agency, or the landlords. Don't get caught up in all of the hype that this is it, this is the end of rent to rent. Rent to rent is a great strategy to be using to build up cash flow, but you have to be doing the right deals. You want to be finding landlords that appreciate the fact that you're going to maintain and look after their property and keep it to a high standard. A lot of landlords aren't bothered about that. A lot of landlords just want the money. And they're normally the properties that you walk around that aren't very nice properties. You'd have to put money into those properties, and they just want as much money as possible because they found out now that they cannot fill the properties themselves. Why? Because they've let the properties go to disrepair and nobody wants to live there anymore. Those aren't always the properties that you want to be looking for. You want to be looking for the good, savvy investors. I look for investors that are like myself, people that have put money into a property and want it maintained to a high standard. Now, that high standard of maintenance will come at a slight cost, not a massive cost if you think of the grand scheme of things, but at a cost where I can afford to look after their properties, make some money, and make sure that their asset is kept to a high standard and they're making money as well. Because all too often, people will go for a very, very cheap letting agency. But then within 12 months, 16 months, all of the money that they've spent on their property to make it really nice, they're having to do it again. They're having to redecorate. They're having to change carpets. Why? Because the properties are not being managed to a high standard. They haven't got the agencies being proactively sorting out little maintenance issues, sorting out things that are going wrong, like we can do as rent-to-rent operators. And this is what we teach everybody. This is how I teach everybody anyway, is to make sure that we deliver a VIP service to any landlords that we work with. And that means that we don't need hundreds of properties to manage. We just need a handful. A handful of properties can give you the cash flow that you want to go and live the life that you want and be able to put systems in place. Of course, you can use rent-to-rent to do serviced accommodation as well, short-term rentals. That is another great strategy. And of course, you can use the management strategy with that as well. But if you need any help with these, then go to thepropertyunleashed.com. Free tools and resources. I have some ebooks on HMO rent-to-rent, ebooks on serviced accommodation, deal sourcing. There's some deal analyzers there as well, and some free masterclass training that can help you to get out there and understand how you're supposed to do this. I give away free training that actually helps people when it comes to contracts that they should be using, and of course, how they should be setting themselves up, because there's far too many people that are just getting it wrong, okay? And realistically, if you can't afford to invest in yourself in a bit of training, like the Rent-to-Rent Business Builder or the Ultimate Serviced Accommodation Business Builder, don't start doing this strategy, okay? Because it's not a quick fix, and you'll probably end up losing more money than you make. Why? Because you just won't do it right, because you won't know everything. We cannot share every last thing with you. And of course, if you're in our community, we are able to help you. We are able to coach you. We are able to support you as you're moving forward. So, is the Renters' Right Bill going to stop rent-to-rent? No, not at all. As it happens, it's a bit of a hindrance. It's not really great. I think the government have made a mistake, but then who am I to actually tell the government what to do? We will survive, we will thrive, and I hope you do the same. Hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to you enjoying another episode very soon. Take care, and bye for now.